This is our Dresden 1 block. I'm going to flip it over so you can see what the back side looks like. And you can, hopefully you can see how this is trimmed, where here it's trimmed right up to the basting stitch with only the fabric on the front showing, and here it's cut through all layers. So this has been trimmed as if this is a completed quilt. What we're going to do in order to join these together and take care of the raw edges on the back, I'm going to show you that right now, is we are first going to take these 2 blocks, pin them and sew them together here, and then we're going to do the same for these 2 blocks. So let me grab my pins and we will go ahead and pin these together. Here are our 2 blocks that we're going to sew together, so we put right sides together. And the first thing you're going to want to do is find some match points. So in this case, I'm looking at this quilting line. I'm going to put a straight pin right there on the edge, and I'm also going to put it in the same place on the other block, right in the same place. I'm going to put that pin there. I'm going to also find the next match point, and so I will just choose this particular one right there, and also pin this through in the same place on the other side. The pins are just sticking straight through there. They're not going back through to hold it in place. I'm going to use the second pin to do that. When I take that second pin, it's a good idea, I grabbed a bent one, to take that pin and not put it through all the layers, but put it through just the seam allowance, and then bring the back side of the pin through the block. That will keep things from shifting by putting the pin in there. Sometimes if you do it through lots of layers, it'll shift if you do that. So put it first through the seam allowance and then bring it back through the rest of the quilt. And at that point you can then move the pins that were your match points. I'm going to do the same thing in a couple places till I get it completely pinned. And then we will take it to the machine and we'll sew these 2 blocks together. Okay, I have my walking foot on my machine, I have thread and the needle and the bobbin that match my block, and I have the straight stitch set up on the machine, and I've lengthened the straight stitch to about 2.8 or 3.0. I'm going to sew right on that basting stitch. Don't think 1/4 inch like you normally do for sewing quilt blocks together, or just doing your normal quilting. Remember, we're really not doing normal quilting, it's a little different technique. But we're going to sew right on that basting stitch, so you want the needle to hit there. I'm going to put my foot down, but I'm going to begin in about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little more, into the block from the seam allowance, 1/8 of an inch from the seam allowance. So I'm going to begin sewing there, but I'm going to sew backwards. So I'm just going to do a back stitch, and then I'm going to go forward and go ahead and sew right along that basting stitch. And then when I get to the end, I'm going to do a back stitch there as well, just a couple stitches in. And we're going to do that with both blocks, and then we're going to go over and press it. So let me do it with this block, and then we'll take it over and press. Okay, here we have our blocks that are sewn together. I'm going to flip these over, and just like a quilt block, you're going to press one in one direction and the other one in the opposite direction. Oh, I forgot to tell you, if you're using wool, one thing that you're going to want to do is use a hammer or rolling pin, because when you press on that wool batting, it could have it pressed permanently in that without the extra poof that it uses. So I'm just going to give a little shot of steam. And with my rolling pin, it stays nice and flat. I'll give it a little press on the front here. And I'll do this one in this direction. And if you want, you can use a little spray starch to help hold that seam down in that direction. And then another little press on the front. And by using the rolling pin, you still have got all your wool batting that gives it a little extra dimension everywhere. So then our next step, what you could do now, if you're working with a big quilt versus these two little pieces, is you could do row by row. You could do the sashing over the seams row by row. Or if you're working with a smaller one like we are now, we can go ahead and sew our rows together and then put the sashing going each direction. It's going to be entirely up to you. Doesn't make any difference which way you do it, but for right now I'm going to pin and sew this seam together. Okay, so we got our little 4 blocks all sewn together, and then here you can press it to one side. If you prefer to press it open, that's fine too. We just recommend that you use, if you're using wool batting, that you use a rolling pin or ham or something underneath so you don't smash all that wool batting. I'll just give it a little spritz of some spray starch. Press from the other side. All right, let's cut our sashing. We're all ready to put the sashing on. Okay, we need to cut fabric for our sashing, so if you have yardage, what you're going to do is you're just going to take your yardage and fold it in half like so, and you would then take your trimmer by George on the ruler side, and there is a marking for binding, and there's also marking for sashing at 1.5 inches. So you would just use that and line that up and then cut it like that. Since we're working with a small project again, I'm going to use a little cute polka dot fabric, and I'm just going to use a trimmer by George. I just wanted to show you what it was like with yardage, but since we're just doing a small project, I'm going to cut a couple of these at 1.5 inches. And if you have a Simplicity Bias tape maker, that would be something you could use to do the pressing on the back. For small projects like this, I really would probably, I'm just going to use the iron just to show you how it gets pressed. So we'll go back. Okay, there's our sashing pieces. I like to starch them. It helps hold them in place when we press them for our sashing. For the sashing, what you're going to do, it's kind of backwards from the camera angle, but you're going to take your fabric and fold it like this. So you have the back of your fabric, and you want the raw edges to come together in the center. So let me go ahead and press that. Okay, so I'll do this other piece here in a minute. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and put this on here to help hold it in place. This is where Wonder Tape is just the best product for this sort of thing. You're going to take the Wonder Tape and stick it right directly, center it over the seam, over the stitching on the seam. We're going to then take the paper backing off of it, and that will help hold your piece of sashing in place. And when I do this, I like to then take the center of the back there where the raw edge is, and I like to line that right up with that seam. And since the tape is a little bit see-through, it's very easy to be able to see where that is. And just apply a little pressure, put that in place, and we'll take it to the sewing machine and we'll sew a serpentine stitch along both sides. Okay, I have my serpentine stitch chosen. Some of the serpentine stitches stitch rather wide. I made mine a little narrower of a stitch so that it just kind of glides its way along the edge. I also have the matching thread that matches your backing fabric and the needle. In the bobbin thread, I have monofilament thread, and the reason we do that is because you have several colors going through here, and we want to make sure that the colors are hidden by the monofilament thread. So then what I do is I just stitch it so it goes down both sides. And there you have it. You have your monofilament thread in the bobbin. That was stitched on both sides, and it's hardly noticeable on the front. And you just do that for all your raw edges and your intersections, and then you have a completed quilt, and all you need to do is add your binding.